Welcome to the Friday night edition of the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. Bill, Anthony, Durst, we have been breaking down the quarterbacks. This is our 6th episode. So if there's a quarterback that's missing, you just have to go back and find that quarterback in one of the previous 5. And then Sam, special guest today, and obviously, I see you in the chat and so many of our other podcasts, so it's good to have you on the other side of the camera. How is everybody's Friday? Like any training camp injuries or anything going on this week that sticks out for anybody?
I think we have to wonder about what on earth is happening in the NFC East at this point, because everybody wants out of that division.
Yeah, and apparently one of their owners just wants to kick out their best player because, I don't know, he doesn't like negotiating, I guess.
Jerry's just going to Jerry. That's the simplest form we can put that in. But
I'm sorry, Cowboys fans, if you're watching this.
Yeah, everybody in Dallas just tuned out at that
rough start.
Yeah.
Well, I think the quarterbacks we're covering today, Josh Hoover of TCU, Cade Klubnik of Clemson, Arch Manning from Texas, Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, LaNorris Sellers from South Carolina. If you are in the state of Texas right now, this is going to get takey pretty soon, like right from the start. Bill, let's shift into gear and tell us about Josh Hoover.
Yes. So Josh Hoover, TCU, you're looking 6'2", 200 pounds. You know, the good things that you see about Hoover is he does have a very good mental trigger. You know, he sees he trusts his eyes on a pre-snap and post-snap. You know, he doesn't hold the ball too long, makes the right decision on occasion. Good touch and anticipation, does show a natural feel when he's layering the ball in, does anticipate, not as well as other quarterbacks, but he does have some anticipation in his game. Mechanically sound for the most part. There are times where he gets panicky and turns into a tap dancer in the pocket, but you don't see a lot of off-base throws. But the big issue with me for Hoover is his arm strength. It's functional. He can make every NFL throw, but beyond that, it's average. For me, he also athletically is kind of, again, average, being polite. He's not a threat to consistently escape and move on the run with his legs. The other thing is he does have a bit of a gunslinger's mentality in terms of very aggressive and confident in his arm, which isn't a top flight arm to have confidence in. There's a lot of questionable decisions with that, especially late over the middle. He just doesn't have a whole lot of traits that scream high upside quarterback for me. This is a guy that is a very fun college quarterback, but I don't see a path to being an NFL long-term starter. So for me right now, he is a day 3 guy, round 4 or 5, my 20th overall quarterback on my list. My comp for him is Spencer Rattler. A lot of the things that we saw in Rattler, a decent arm, but didn't have a top flight arm, decent athletically, but wasn't a true dual threat guy, a gunslinger's mentality when he really doesn't have the arm for it. Those are the kinds of things I see with Hoover. And I think Hoover could be a really good NFL backup quarterback that can come in and spot start for you, maybe win you a couple of games now and again, but he's not going to be the guy for you long-term is how I would see Josh Hoover. Durst, what do you have on the TCU signal caller?
Yeah, so I agree on many of the points. I wrote down he's either average or below average in just about every physical trait, including size and arm strength, and only slightly above average when it comes to timing, anticipation, and accuracy. I wrote down that, TCU did not face many high-level pass rushers, and as a runner, Hoover only had 2 missed tackles forced. So to kind of keep that perspective, Luke Altmaier had 9. Billy Edwards had 14. Cade Klubnik had 15. Drew Alara had 21. Sam Levitt had 34. And John Metier had 54. So 2 missed tackles forced. Now, some of that was the fact that Savion Williams, a wide receiver, played a lot of Wildcat quarterback, so he may have absorbed some of that rushing production from him. But even with him being gone this year, I don't really see him as being much of a running threat. He's also 6'1", 6'2", and 200 pounds. Now, that being said, I mean, he was a redshirt sophomore who set the TCU single season passing records with 3,949 yards last year as a redshirt sophomore. That is something that's pretty impressive. I think he's a good distributor with some functional athleticism. I think he's a good quick processing and release. And his 11.5 pressure to sack ratio over the last 2 seasons was also pretty impressive. So I know we're all going to kind of get into the wide receivers, but to me, I felt like that TCU wide receivers bailed him out. I saw a lot of diving catches, a lot of spectacular catches, and I think they made Hoover look a little bit better than he actually was. So I felt like Hoover threw with a lot of confidence when targeting Jack Besh. And why not? He only had 1 drop on the season, caught 65% of his contested targets. And while Savion Williams was a little bit more feast and famine, he too caught 88.9% of his contested targets and 72.3% of his overall targets. Slot receiver J.P. Richardson actually chopped both of them with 75% catch rate on 76 targets. And Eric McAllister might have been the best 4th receiver in the nation with a 19.5 yards per catch and 0 interceptions when targeted. The only problem is that only McAllister returns, who I like a lot, but I just think we're going to see regression to the mean with Hoover. I think we're going to see a guy that, not everybody gets better every single year. It's not always just a linear or upward trajectory at these guys. And he's just a guy, I think, if I had a prediction, is a guy that may take a step backwards. So, Anthony, what do you think of Hoover?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what you guys have already said. My favorite thing about him, I think he has a really nice release, nice quick release, and he's able to put good velocity on his passes. I also think he does well getting the ball out in a relatively quick amount of time and not taking a lot of bad sacks. I think he only had like 15 this past season, which is that's a pretty good number. You guys talked about it. This is someone with functional arm strength, but nothing special. Functional athlete, but he is not by any means going to be a dual threat, scrambling threat. Durst, you talked about the 2 missed tackles forced. He only had 86 rushing yards all of last year, which is some of the guys on this list had that in 1 game practically. So he's not going to be a factor on the ground. He's not going to be a factor in terms of, elite arm talent. For me, the ceiling is just NFL backup. I am also kind of worried about only being 200 pounds. If you're only 200 pounds and you aren't like a great athlete and you aren't a great scrambling threat, I'm worried about that frame, lasting long in the NFL. So, we'll see how the season goes. Also, too, like you said, Durst, losing Savion Williams and Jack Besh is a big red flag. And I like Eric McAllister. I think he's going to be a good player that can be a draft riser at wide receiver. But certainly, I don't think the weapons are to the level that they were this past season. So Hoover is going to need to, step up if the TCU offense is going to be able to be as successful as it was. And I'm just not convinced that he can do it at this point. Sam, hopefully you can be a little more positive so that the Horned Frogs fans watching right now don't click off and leave a lot of angry comments for us.
Well, I think Bill said, wherever Bill had him in the quarterback rankings, you guys are a little bit more optimistic on this quarterback class than I am. I have him as my QB9, and he's still like an early day 3 grade for me. With that being said, when you look at this class as a whole, he is probably the best at winning within the pocket in terms of processing and winning within the pocket. and also avoiding pressure while in the pocket. Among the major quarterbacks we talk about when we think about guys who could really contend for first or second round picks in this year's draft, only 11.5% of his career pressures get turned into sacks so far, second lowest rate among all those quarterbacks. So he's a very efficient player at avoiding sacks. I didn't think he had as many moments where he had these like terrible turnover-worthy plays as much as maybe you guys did. I've been a little bit higher on the anticipation, I think, especially over the middle of the field. I think they're a little bit higher on some of the ball placement he has down the hashes a little bit in terms of some of those fade routes, some of the touch he throws with. I think the touch is probably I'm a little bit higher on right now than where some of you guys are at in comparison. But the ability to really win within the pocket and have that post-snap processing speed to work to the backside dig, to be able to get through 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 at a very quick and high level. That's something that not a lot of guys in this class do, and certainly I don't think anyone really does it at the level that Josh Hoover does. Now, is it going to be for every scheme? Certainly not. But there are certain schemes where you're going to require you to do a little bit more in terms of the mental processing side of things. And Josh Hoover's going to be one of those players versus you get guys who come from the Ole Miss system or something like that, where you're not really asking to do much of that, and you take time to develop. Someone like Hoover's going to have the mental acumen to step into an NFL caliber offense where you're asked to shoulder a heavier workload and be able to handle that from day one. Now, is it ceiling kind of capped because the physical tools aren't there? I totally agree with you there. I think there's definitely a ceiling conversation to have, but I think the floor is also going to be a bit higher than what we've gotten to in this discussion. And a lot of the concerns you bring up about like the frame and having the traditional size and weight, we can also transfer those over to other quarterbacks within this class, like Garrett Nussmeier and Cade Klubnik, in terms of not having top receiving talent return. That's also a conversation we can have with teams like Texas and LSU to some extent, who are bringing in transfers to maybe replace some guys they lost through the draft this past year. So I think a lot of those concerns also apply to some other quarterbacks who are viewed highly within this class. So as to me, it's kind of more of a level playing field in some of those areas that maybe we brought up in this conversation. But to me, like I'm looking at Josh Hoover as a guy who's got an early 4th round grade for me. I think probably will be a top 100 pick because if he maintains the level of play he had this past year or shows some incremental development, just because of the value of quarterbacks. He is my QB9 right now.
Okay. So I will add this too. For me, my grade, he was early to mid 4th, kind of in the 4th, 5th round range, somewhere on day 3. For me, I think he fits best in a West Coast scheme where there's timing on his routes and timing on his plays. Sam, do you see that style of scheme working best for Hoover at the next level?
Yeah, I would have to agree, just because of the fact that you have the time aspect of it and it requires you to be mentally on point. And it's a little bit more focused on some of the shorter to intermediate level stuff. And I think it's definitely being more efficient in that area versus you don't want to really put him like in a vertical attacking scheme to some extent. But West Coast offense can work about that. Certain Shanahan level principles can work. So I think you can really focus on those kind of schemes. If you think about certain teams like to stretch the field vertically, but there's also horizontal stretching Shanahan principle schemes out there. I think that's probably one that you want to target for someone like Josh Hoover because it does have the limited arm talent, but he has the mental acumen to make it work at a high level from an early time in his career. So you're bringing him as a backup.
Yeah,
I don't know if he'll ever be an NFL starter, but I think he's a guy who can maybe spot start for you early in his career.
So let me ask a question of you guys then. Since we got into the scheme a little bit, I would sort of describe TCU as a sort of a hybrid offense, which combines air raid and RPO concepts with a couple of snaps under center here or there. Does anybody think that this is the wrong offense for him and that has sort of held him back, or do we think? Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're bringing up the West Coast offense, do we think that the offense may be holding him back at all?
I don't think it holds him back so much as it just doesn't play to his strengths as much as it should. Because you're right, there's a lot of air raid principles that cause it to stretch vertically, but there's some, power, what I call power spread schemes that stretches it horizontally too, and that's where you do see him shine. It's not the perfect offense for him to shine in, but it also doesn't hurt him. It's kind of like everything I said about his game. It's there. It doesn't hurt him. It doesn't help him. Just like his traits, doesn't hurt him, doesn't help him. Anthony, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I agree. I think because I don't think like the air raid stuff is fine. He's just not like the RPO stuff. He's not a running threat, right? So it's like, why is that part of the offense that we're trying to get him? If that's not a strength of his, and he's never, again, he had 86 rushing yards this past season. he's not going to be this kind of RPO, could take the ball and scramble, whatever. Like, that's just not, he's not that kind of threat. Until he shows that he can be that, it's not, viable for me. And I would also say, I agree. Like, I think West Coast, sort of spread timing concept, like that's kind of what I think is best for him. I saw somebody, I think it was Ryan, commented like a year behind Stafford in LA. I think that makes a lot of sense. Miami was in my head. Kind of can, get the ball out to the playmakers. And you know what? 12 yards is more than I run. So I guess I'll give him that. But I think Miami came to mind for me. The Dolphins, not the Hurricanes. As a team that I think could kind of play to his strengths in terms of, getting the ball out and being decisive and, again, having like quick release and good timing. That's kind of what Tua's been, for Mike McDaniel in Miami, as the guy who can just get the ball out to Tyreek and Waddle and Achane and all these, super fast, great players. But yeah, and an offense that does that. And again, that's kind of why too, I think losing Savion and Besh is a big deal, is because Savion was this dynamite athlete that you could just give him the ball and let him do the rest. I don't know if that player is on the team now. And then Durst, you talked about Besh only having one drop. Is there that truly reliable guy that can be consistently catching the ball, even if the ball isn't, so perfectly thrown? I don't know if that guy exists now on TCU. So it just feels like there's a lot of things that could lead to a regression. They may not, but it just feels like things are working against him right now.
100%.
I will say, based on like the offensive scheme, they still run some of the stuff that Garrett Riley had there previously, but like in Clemson, where Garrett Riley is now, they do run more quick game stuff than I think TCU does. So there's a few more easy buttons in Clemson's offense than there's in TCU's currently. That being said, I think that while Hoover can take advantage of those shorter to intermediate level routes that happen in some of those more timed up schemes, he has the ability to handle the ball in these longer developing plays because he can work through the reads so quickly. And he does have some decent level of pocket navigation skills and some anticipation, so he can get to those backside routes. So he doesn't have to be all reliant on these quick game shorter throws. He's a player I'm interested in. I don't know if like the Rams would be a fit, Anthony, because of the fact that McVay jettisoned Jared Goff to go for like the ultimate tools guy in terms of arm talent with Matthew Stafford. So I don't know that Rams would really be a fit long term, but I think there's, again, very scheme specific type player, but I think he does have a route to seeing playing time sometime early in his career, be a high level backup. We might be talking more about like a Gardner Minshew level player long term, but if you get that player in the 4th round at quarterback, that still holds value.
Yep. 100%. And with that, Sam, I love the segue going into Clemson, because next up on the docket is the Clemson signal caller, Cade Klubnik. Anthony, you want to kick it off with Death Valley's quarterback?
I would love to, because this is my quarterback one. Spoiler. So let's talk about Cade Klubnik. And I think it's important to sort of give the whole context of Cade Klubnik as a quarterback. This is a guy who was a former Texas high school football star. He went to the same high school that coached up Drew Brees, coached up Nick Foles. So this is a legacy Texas, Westlake High School in Texas. By no means am I an expert on Texas high school football, but I know Drew Brees and I know Nick Foles. He beat Quinn Ewers for the state championship in 2020 that would have been, or 2021, 2020, I don't know, whatever. Beat Quinn Ewers in the state championship, highly touted coming out. Initially was at Texas, and then transferred to Clemson, and from there, he has just been. So 2023 was rough. 2023 was a bad year. He did not. I think he looked like a day 3 guy at absolute best. And then 2024 comes around, and it looks like a completely different quarterback. And the biggest improvement I would say that you saw was his ability to recognize pre-snap and make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. I think dramatically improved. He showed really good poise in the pocket, made NFL throws consistently. There's one throw against Pitt where he basically he drops back and then moves up in the pocket, then moves to his right and just delivers a beautiful tight spiral to his receiver on the right side. He is a very, I would call him a deceptively great athlete. And that's not to say he is not, we're going to talk about LaNorris Sellers later. He's not that kind of athlete, and not in the world of the Josh Allens and the Lamar Jacksons of the world. But he is a threat. He's got wheels. And he's a threat to make plays as a runner, as a scrambler. He can also get outside the pocket and make accurate throws as well. He keeps his eyes downfield. I think the big thing, there's still a little too much gunslinger for me at times. He doesn't have, I think his arm is good. It's not by any means the strongest arm you're ever going to see. I think he's a little better of an athlete than Joe Burrow. And he's
much
opinion.
faster than Joe Burrow. He is much faster.
Yeah,
than Joe Burrow.
I think he's a pretty, again, not elite by any means, but I think if I had to guess, I think he'd run a 4.7-ish. That's kind of what I'm ballparking him around if I had to guess a 40 time. But yeah, it's a little too much gunslinger. It doesn't have the strongest arm in the world, but I don't think it's really going to hold him back that much as long as he's able to continue to improve his decision making. I think that's an area that dramatically increased from 2023 to 2024, but still at times can be a bit problematic. Sam, I think you mentioned before, in terms of what he's going to have at when we were talking about who's going to have what at receiver this year. He's got Antonio Williams, who I would say is a top 50 player for most people. What's the other receiver's name who's now escaping
Bryant
me?
Wesco,
thank you. He's a very good player as well. He's not going to be eligible this year, but somebody that we could be talking about as a potential first-round receiver for 2027. So there's definitely the bottom line with him for me. There's definitely still areas of improvement for Klubnik, but the improvement from 2023 to 2024 for me was so impressive that I think it warrants that if we're projecting that he can have that kind of improvement and growth again for this season with a team that we expect to probably be at least a playoff team, if not contend for the national championship, all the makings are there that he can be at least in the QB1 conversation. And I just feel like of all the quarterbacks that we've talked about throughout this entire process of talking about 30 quarterbacks at Draft Professor, I think he is the most, I feel the best about him going forward. I have the least concerns, and I see NFL quarterback on the most consistently compared to the other quarterbacks that may have higher ceilings. I would acknowledge that there's other quarterbacks that have higher ceilings than him, but they, to me, have bigger question marks. Whereas Klubnik, I feel good about him being at least a solid NFL starter if everything continues on the path that we've seen thus far. But Durst, I'll throw it over to you. What do you think of Klubnik?
Yeah, so tell you what, I'll start off with a couple of comps. I wrote down an upside comp of Bo Nix and a downside of Colt McCoy. Kind of similar, size kind of guys. And by the way, for those that haven't listened to me before, I'm old, so I can't remember everything I want to say. So I tend to read a little bit from my notes. These guys got sharp minds. They're young guys that can just pull it out of their head. But anyway, so Klubnik has a good arm and is accurate in the short to intermediate levels of the field. More of a distributor than a playmaker with a lightning fast delivery in the quick game. Throws a smooth and catchable ball with good touch timing and anticipation. He will look off defenders to help open up throwing windows. He tends to avoid negative plays, only 6 interceptions and a 15% pressure to sack ratio in 2024. Is efficient enough as a runner to extend plays or gain free yards when the defense has their back turned to him. He plays a similar game. He plays the game in a similar manner to Bo Nix when he was at Oregon. Anthony, you had said I forget what you said was you thought the time was. I do some time estimates that may not be very accurate, but I wrote down 4.65 for my estimate for his 40 time. Now, weaknesses, I believe he's got below average size and frame, little to no tackle breaking strength. So there's a lot of times when people get their hands on him, whether or not it's, whether or not he's running in the open field or it's in the pocket, just don't really see much tackle breaking strength there. He tends to stretch you horizontally more than vertically when it comes to passing, and passes lack velocity or the ability to reach all levels of the field. I saw a bunch of double taps going through progressions, and then the deeper passes tend to float. Too many panicked and poor decisions when pressured. Hand size might be an issue. He's got 22 fumbles over the last 2 seasons. What may appear like arm arrogance might actually be just supreme confidence in this awesome Clemson wide receiver group that Anthony alluded to. But in the end, Klubnik has made steady improvements in each season and is on his upward trajectory coincides with Clemson's bringing back a loaded team in 2025. So I think they've got a great chance to win the national championship. I think Clemson, Klubnik himself has got a good chance of winning the Heisman. And if all that comes into play, a decent chance of being a top 10 pick. So, Sam, what do you think of Klubnik?
Yeah, so I have a 2nd round grade on Cade. I went to Clemson, so I'm going to probably be a little bit biased in here. Just take that into account. I have a 2nd round grade on him. I only have like a dozen or so 1st round grades so far in this class, so that's why he's got a 2nd round grade. But he is a top 20 player for me. I like Cade's probably his throwing motion release the most of any quarterback I've studied so far in this class. It's so quick. His ability to get the ball out, but he gets out with power. He does drive it pretty well, despite having that fairly quick throwing motion. And I think it's probably the cleanest, most crisp one there is so far that I've studied. There's really no wasted motion at all. And because of that throwing motion, he's actually able to get the ball out and be basically as accurate and as on target under pressure as he is when he's clean. So he can be moving off the spot. He can be off platform. He's basically as accurate as he is when he's throwing with a set base, which is pretty rare. I think there's some superb moments of accuracy when he is moving. When he is pressure, which really helps me out quite a lot. He was actually PFF's highest rated quarterback for this class under pressure this past year. So he's a guy who can manage pressure well within the pocket. I do think there are times where there's sometimes a difference between poise and being like, a little jittery and stuff. I think there are moments definitely where he's a little bit jittery within the pocket, but he's a guy who can also step up, climb the pocket, reset his base, and throw and win within the pocket. So he's a guy who can do that. He's tremendous on rolling out in terms of his accuracy. And he's got very fluid hips as well. He'll be able to flip them around when he needs to throw on the move. There are moments where I do wish he'd be more within structure at times and just kind of be more decisive. I see a lot of double clutching on his tape, which kind of leads him to be late on some throws. I think there are moments of anticipation, but he needs to anticipate a little bit more often to get the ball out early, not make his receivers hold up at all. It's tough to say what the ceiling truly is because this Garrett Riley offense is very like half-field reads or one read and go kind of stuff. And it's not that he can't do more complicated offenses. We just don't necessarily know if he can because this has been basically what he's been throughout the course of his college career. So there's some projection there you have to be comfortable with. But overall, this guy, I think, has really good touch. He does a really good job winning under pressure, winning on late downs. He's got good speed. You guys throw out some potential numbers for him. I think you could test like low 4.5s, honestly, because Brady Cook ran like 4.59 this past year. I think Cade can get to that. So he's going to be a fairly fast runner in this class. He is like light and lean, a bit of an untraditional build, but he's a tough guy who's willing to stay in the pocket and throw under pressure. He'll take shots if he has to in the run game and get the first down. He does keep his eyes downfield on the move, and he's often on the move. So he does a really good job creating outside of structure, and I said just like rare accuracy off platform. I just wish he showcased more anticipation, get the ball a little bit more, and I want him to be more decisive early in the play because there are moments where he has a guy open, but he double clutches, he's a little bit delayed on pulling the trigger. Just be a little bit more decisive, trusting yourself a little bit more often early in the play, get that ball out. But look at like the flashes of hitting tight window throws, the touch he has. It all ranks towards the top of the class. Those best moments from him, especially late in the season this past year, are some of the best throws you'll see from any quarterback in this class. So I think he is my QB1 by a fairly decent margin right now. There are guys in this class who could surpass him in due time, but for right now, for this 2026 class, he's the guy I'm projecting to be in QB1.
Bill.
Okay. So for me, Cade Klubnik, 6'1", 204. Durst, you talked about hand size, 9.5-inch hands. You know, from an athlete perspective, I probably see somewhere between 4.65 and 4.7 is where I would see in terms of his athleticism. Not super quick, but not super slow either. But when you look at the positives, you know, he is a very dynamic athlete. This is a guy who has the ability to get out and use those wheels. You know, very good touch on the deep ball, you know, shows almost an advanced level ability to layer the deep passes in there, frozen passes on a rope. My big thing is he's a natural improviser who thrives and fails in chaos. Every Klubnik game can be described as 10 plays where he thrives in chaos and he looks like a bomb technician with no instructions trying to cut the red wire and everyone's freaking out and he just snips it and goes home. And then there's also the same game 10 plays later where he clips the wrong wire and here we are. He does very well with pre-snap recognition looks. He trusts his eyes pre-snap, but the problem with me for Klubnik is once the ball's snapped and there's rotation, especially in deep safety looks, he struggles to quickly identify it and be able to exploit it. He almost locks in on his primary receiver on occasion. The frame is on the leaner side. We're talking 6'1", 204. If we knock Hoover for it, we've got to knock Klubnik for it as well. You know, I'd love to see him add 10 pounds even just to help him withstand a full NFL season. My biggest concern with him outside of the decision-making under pressure is his short passing game and how efficient he is in that short passing game needs refinement. There's a lot of times I saw that the touch, the placement, especially on underneath routes, especially on quick game concepts, it just wasn't there. Balls fell short, balls went high, balls went inside, balls went outside, especially on short games to his left. To over the middle where he could see it, and Sam, you talked about that half read, single read. He looked great. But when you get him going to the left or to the right, it kind of tapered off a little bit. For me, he is my QB9, but he's in my top 100. He's my 90th overall prospect. And my comp for him, and when I say this, let me preface this, it is the BYU version of Zach Wilson. It is not the Jets version of Zach Wilson. It's not the seeing ghosts guy. It's the BYU version of Zach Wilson because you have a guy who has really good arm talent, a functional athlete. You know, if you put him in a system where it's one read, RPO, half reads even, he looks really good. But for me, if I were to take him out of that Clemson bubble and put him in an NFL offense, I'd want it to be a spread concept, single read, half read. Don't make him try to guess a multi-answer test. Here's your single read. Here's a backup. That would be the extent for Cade Klubnik. It's almost like if he can't find that initial read, he panics, and then he can't find the second read, and he just really panics. And then that's where you start to see him just force balls. You start to see very panicked decision-making, just like you saw with Zach Wilson at BYU. So I see the vision. Absolutely not. Do not put that curse on me. No, the Browns are not going to ruin him because the big thing is, as we all know, Browns love RAS scores. His frame's just going to get him tossed out of the window. But I can't say much because they took Dylan Gabriel, so that goes out the window too. But I see the vision with Cade. Certainly see the vision. For me, short game refinement and just learn to calm down when there's pressure. Like it's okay to throw a ball away. That is what I would want to stress to Cade and any Clemson coaching staff members that are watching. It's okay to get rid of a ball. It's okay to throw a ball away. It's okay to live and die another day. And I just don't see that yet. It almost feels like he's trying to press, but I know he's not pressing, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But yeah, I'm lower on Cade Klubnik. I know there's a lot of love for Klubnik in the community, but I see the vision and I see the roadmap. But I also see all the potholes along the way that are going to give him a flat tire on the side of the road.
I actually have the quick game written down as a plus for him, so I think I'm just going to disagree with you on that area. I think the quick game and short game are actually positives for him. Regarding, I agree with you that sometimes within chaos he is a bit I said jittery earlier. I can go back to that. There are moments like that certainly, but also the numbers point out that he's actually very accurate within the chaos and actually has to make some of his best plays when he's on the move and when he's trying to stress a little bit within the pocket. I would like to see him read out more and be more confident, work to the backside dig, and kind of be more poised throughout the course of the play. But right now, that kind of stuff under pressure hasn't really hurt him to the extent that we talked about with other quarterbacks. He's actually been fairly efficient in those moments. Mm-hmm. And because his legs are so good, they can actually manage a lot of that, get out, and kind of escape from that point. So it hasn't been a situation that's really come back to bite him yet. We'll see if that happens this year or not. But he's actually managed pretty well in those moments of chaos so far. And it's been a huge part of why Clemson's offense has so many explosive plays this year, especially downfield. And now they finally have wide receivers again. They have 3 guys who are really good, and Tony Williams. They have 2 guys on the outside who can actually get some contested catches now. Right. It's probably going to be a very explosive passing offense this year.
100%. So we talked about it with Hoover. Obviously, we got to talk about it here. If you're looking at an NFL offense for Klubnik to slot into, and Sam, I'll start with you. Where would be the dream offense that you would drop Klubnik into?
I don't even know if I've come up with one yet. Off the top of my head, I haven't really thought about team comparison yet, but I think you're trying to obviously work for a offense that's going to push you more vertically. I kind of would want a vertical attacking offense. I'd like to see as a natural progression for him to go to a place that works in some maybe basic West Coast principles so he can kind of get to exposed to that, start learning that, and develop his game out. Because you can't have him be this, I'll say you can't have him take the easy path the entire time of his career. He has to develop at some point. So I'd like to see an offense that has some primarily focused on vertical attacking downfield, but also incorporate some West Coast principles to kind of fill out their overall passing attack. There's not many offenses that adhere just one simple scheme anymore. You have to work in combinations of everything, especially with modern defenses. So I'd like to see a vertical passing attack that incorporates some of the West Coast principles that really fill out the short to intermediate game level for him.
I like it. Anthony, if you had to drop Klubnik into a perfect NFL offense, where would you drop him in? Would you drop him in Gotham with you?
Yeah, very selfishly, I would like him in the Jets offense. I will. Yeah, I joke, but actually, now that we have Engstrand, I can never say his name right. Yeah. But the guy from the Lions coming over. I do think that's an offense where you see them. You saw last year where they would get the ball out in these sort of West Coast. Guys like Amon-Ra and out to Jahmyr Gibbs and whatever. But they wanted to also get the ball to Jameson Williams and Sam Laporta as well. So if that's we honestly, we really don't know what the Jets offense is going to look like for sure yet. But if that's sort of the vibe, the Ben Johnson tree of offensive play calling if that's what we get in New York, and combine that with, we have 2 quarterbacks on our roster right now in Fields and Tyrod Taylor that also use their legs very effectively and can also incorporate, their rushing ability into how the offense is run. So, if that's kind of what we get from the Jets this year, the Jets are going to almost certainly be in the quarterback market for 2026. So I would certainly be a fan of Klubnik being there. But to sum it up, I think it needs to be an offense where it does have those West Coast principles, but pushes it vertically, like you said, and can also knows how to utilize him as a scrambling threat, because I do think that is one of the really crucial parts of his game. And not even just scrambling, but just being able to get outside the pocket and use his athleticism. And even if he's still, able to make throws, just moving around and using that athleticism, I think is a big part of his game. So whatever offense it is, I think also needs to really try to focus on that.
Yep. And Durst, what about you? If you had to drop Cade Klubnik into an NFL offense, where would you drop him in at?
I'll give you a quick answer. So let's just say hypothetically that Bo Nix suffers a gruesome career-ending injury. I think he would look beautiful in a Peyton or a Sean Payton offense there.
Okay, I love it.
Not trying to jinx anybody, Bo. Hope you do well.
Right, knock on wood for Bo Nix. So next one up, Jim, you're muted.
Jim, you're muted.
Jim, you're muted. The Clemson fans unplugged your mic, Jim. They had enough.
No, I was just saying that we lost the entire Browns fan base.
No.
The Broncos fans are about to kill Durst, so that's
yeah.
great.
Yeah. Durst is not allowed into Denver airspace anymore. No. But the next quarterback on the docket is one of the bigger names. And Durst, I'll kick it over to you because I know your comp for him is pretty legendary. Let's talk about Arch Manning. Durst, the floor is yours.
When this draft season began, there were some people that were saying Arch Manning could be the first pick, and a lot of pretty famous draft analysts were coming out saying there's no way he's going to be in this draft, and some people would say, why would I even spend a second watching his film at this point? And well, it doesn't take long to get through his film. He had two career starts, and so he is just a redshirt going into his redshirt sophomore season. He's got, a lot of people pointed out Lance Zierlein that the two Mannings of Eli and Peyton both used up all of their eligibility. And so we may be, jumping the gun a little bit. But I don't mind being a year early on him because he is number one on my scoring system. So, we went through 30 quarterbacks, and he finished number one in my numerical scoring system, which I have just incorporated this year, so it doesn't have a long track record or anything. But anyway, he's got advanced mechanics, release, and good footwork, excellent intangibles, very good size, mobility, and arm strength and accuracy. He's got the arm to access every level of the field. He's not afraid to test coverages deep. When given time, he will patiently go through his progressions. Now, that is a key of when given time. There were some games there from like Georgia where it was a little bit more difficult, but Texas traditionally does have a pretty good offensive line. He's able to extend plays with good accuracy on the move, throws a beautiful deep ball. And his legs are an asset that neither Peyton or Eli enjoyed. Keep in mind, he's not Peyton or Eli's son. He is brother Cooper's son. He is accurate on the run, and Sark's pro-style spread and Texas's schedule are a really good preparation for the NFL. So weaknesses is inexperience, 2 starts, a bunch of overthrows, especially during the Louisiana Monroe, which was his first start of his career. A lot of them when he was targeting Jaden Blue, running back Jaden Blue, he had probably like 4 really misfires in that first game. Most of his misfires were high and or maybe a little too hot. So it seems like what I saw of his missed passes, they're a little too high, maybe coming out a little too hot for the distance. He also, threw a couple into triple coverages, which again, I kind of like the fact he's willing to, to test the defense. While he is athletic, he's not escaping from the guise of like a Jalen Walker, a Sonny Styles, a Torian Yorks of the world. And his 26.9 pressure to sack ratio and only and 4 fumbles in 2024. So again, he's athletic, but he's not like he's just able to be this elite athlete. Turnover and sack avoidance is something that I think will just naturally improve with more experience. So I have it down sort of as a negative, but sort of not really because I expect that to improve. In the end, I just think it's too difficult to bet against Arch. He combines every trait you were looking for from a physical, mental, processing, and he seems to have this it factor. While some of it may be media-driven, there just is a feeling of inevitability with him. So if I had to bet on one person being the number 1 pick in the draft, be it maybe 2026, 27, or 28, this would be the guy. We're just not too sure what year it would be. So, Anthony, what do you think of Arch Manning?
So I think.
You know what? I'm sorry. My comp was Andrew Luck. I should say that since I got kind of the introduction with that. But Andrew Luck, 6'4", 234 with a 4.67 second 40. I think these are a statistic or analytical numbers there that's going to be very similar to what we're going to see out of Manning, but a very similar advanced mechanics coming into the NFL. Sorry to cut you off, Anthony.
No. But that was very much worth cutting me off for. So when you talked about all the draft analysts that were saying, why should we watch Arch and why would I invest my time? I was one of those people. Because I just felt and I still do. I just don't see any world he comes out in 2026, and it's a combination of factors. It's one, the fact that he's only going to have one full year as a starter, when after this season. Also, just the Manning family and the Manning history and the way that they do their business. I just don't think he's coming out. But all that said, I did watch him, and I do think I think you hit a lot of the points. I think he checks every box from a physical standpoint. 6'4", 220. He's very mobile and very athletic. Certainly has all of the arm that you could want. He flashed the ability to make throws at just about anywhere on the football field. He had that crazy in the UTSA game that he came in for. Had that huge 60-yard touchdown run or whatever it was. So this just, even in the limited amount of playing time that he's had at Texas, he has you see it. You see why he is so highly touted and why he is regarded as a future number 1 overall pick. I think one of the interesting things too about him is, obviously, but everybody knows this by now probably, but his uncle's Peyton and his uncle's Eli and his father is Cooper Manning and his grandfather's Arch Manning. He has all of these, legendary players and storied athletes in his family. And he sort of just feels like, in the best way, he feels like an amalgamation of all of them. He's got Arch's playmaking ability and his father's, people forget his father Cooper was a very highly touted wide receiver prospect. And the only reason he didn't get a chance to continue and have a successful career was because of a spinal injury. So, but his father is a great athlete in his own right. Obviously, Peyton is known as probably the smartest quarterback to ever play. And you see, you talked about the processing, Durst. And I mean, listen, I put in my notes, are there times where he stares down his first read too long? Yes. Are there times where he holds the ball too long? Yes. There are absolutely, mistakes and, bad plays are on his tape. That's going to happen. But you see the flashes and the emergence of someone who can become a very elite processor in the way that the Peyton Manning was, and Eli maybe was to a lesser extent, but also was great in his own right. And also too, I think, and I don't love doing this in general because I try not to I've never met Arch Manning and I don't think anyone here has, but the vibe and the feeling that you get is this is someone that is just beloved by everyone and feels like a leader, and he feels confident but not cocky. Like he checks every box from a physical standpoint, and he checks every box from a mental standpoint, and he also just checks every box from a social standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. He just feels like he's gonna be the guy, but he's not gonna act to like the guy. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's one of those weird things in a scouting report, but it feels like it's inevitable that he is going to be a great quarterback. I just happen to think that it's not going to be until the 2027 draft when, who knows what team he'll wind up with. But it only just feels like we're scratching the surface with how great he can be. But you have to be excited about even the little stuff that he's put on tape at this point. But Bill, I'll throw it over to you now to add to that on Arch.
Yeah, so with Arch, when you look at him, 6'4", 225. So this is a guy that has the prototypical. One second here. So 6'4", 225. When you're watching him, you see, and Anthony, you hit on this. You see everything of his uncles. You see the processing ability of Peyton. You see the arm talent of Eli. You see the playmaking ability of his grandfather and Archie. But the one thing you also see is he's got some very good wheels. This is athletic, just like Cooper is. The concern is that we just haven't seen a very large sample size when we're talking about Arch. But we're going to find out very quickly because week 1 we're in the shoe with the Buckeyes, and then in the first 6 weeks we've got Florida on the road in the swamp. So we're going to find out what type of quarterback he's going to be. The big thing that I really like is his throwing motion. It's just natural. It's quick. It's effortless. It's repeatable, and then on timing routes, you see anticipation that's advanced, and not advanced in the ways like he's been doing this for years, advanced in the way of, hey, I have a guy who doesn't really have a large sample size, so I'd expect him to be a little bit rough around the edges when it comes to anticipation. But Arch isn't that. The big issue obviously is the limited experience. This is a very limited sample size. And I've said it before. I don't think we see him in this class. I think the only way we do, there's a 3% chance. And in order to do that, there's got to be 3 boxes that have to be checked. Arch has to win the Heisman. Texas has to win the national championship. And the Manning family collective, whoever ends up with that top overall pick, has to be comfortable with the Manning family collective Arch going to that team. Because we talk about it. We just talked about it with Shadur Sanders and Deion Sanders and all of that. The Manning family does have a history of doing this. Peyton went back to school to avoid getting drafted by the Jets. Eli had the trade issue where he didn't want to go to the New York Giants or didn't want to go to the Chargers, ended up with the Giants. So when it comes down to it, the Manning family is all about putting the Manning family in the best position to succeed. They did it with Peyton. They did it with Eli. They're going to do it with Arch. So for me, Arch is my QB2. He's my 7th overall prospect. My comp would be an athletic and healthier Chad Pennington, because we often don't think about how cerebral Chad Pennington was when he was with the Jets. And Anthony, you've seen some of it. And I think that's what Arch can be, is an athletic, healthy version of Chad Pennington. But Durst, I definitely see the path where he's an Andrew Luck. I see the path where he's this. We often throw around generational prospect when it's not warranted. And we could get to next season. He could go into the shoe, for example, and completely dominate. And then by the end of the season, we're talking about him in that rarefied air. But I'm not ready to do that yet. But Sam, take us home on Arch Manning.
Yeah. DJ Lagway versus Arch Manning is going to be an incredible showcase for 2027 prospects. Because right now, I think internally, all the stuff coming out of Texas programs, that not just from him, but from like the coaches as well, is that I fully expect him back for next year. And think about NIL, like it makes sense. If he stays at school for 1 or even 2 more years past this point, he's going to make probably as much money at that time as he would make on his entire rookie contract in the NFL. So there's real reason for him to stay in college beyond just developing and playing within a very quarterback-friendly system. But Arch, I thought the flashes were fantastic. I mean, to me, he would be in the conversation to be right there with probably slotting in below LaNorris Sellers for me. Probably ahead of Aiden Childs, though. So he'd probably be like QB3, QB4 in that range for me within this class. again, sample size is incredibly low. It's very unrealistic to try to build out an actual grade based on that. As you remember, like me as a Clemson fan, I remember like 2.5, 3 games of DJ Uyunglele back in the day, filling in for Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor Lawrence had like COVID and like an ankle injury or something like that. DJ comes in, almost beats Notre Dame in Notre Dame, and everyone's like, "Oh, he's the next great one. He's in the Fansville commercial, making millions of dollars in commercials," and then he goes out and he's kicked off the field in Clemson in like 2 years or something like that. So I do think we have to temper our expectations a little bit. And this guy, Arch, is a tremendous talent, but the idea that he's going to walk in and he's going to light the world on fire immediately, I think that's just probably unrealistic. There's so few quarterbacks that have the ability to do that. And I think we have to, when drawing conclusions from these couple of games, it's very difficult because it is such a narrow sample size. I will say the Louisiana Monroe game, not very good. The Mississippi State game, amazing. So it's very much a high and low system where you go between the two. I think that you looked at like his timing and going through his reads in the Mississippi State game was fantastic. I thought it was much faster than it had been the previous 2 times he'd seen in action. There are definitely moments of anticipation, which for a quarterback with so little experience is great to see. I do like the throwing motion as well. I also like how he's really good at aligning his body, keeping his shoulders level during a throw. There's a bit of a sidearm release at times. I think that impacts his accuracy a little bit in the short area in terms of like for screens, that kind of stuff right around the line of scrimmage. But otherwise, he's fairly clean in that area. Accesses multiple arm slots to fit the ball in tight windows. Has the arm strength where he can access throws 50 yards downfield and greater than that. Really good velocity as well. I don't think I would say like A+ arm, maybe like A- arm or so, but still, like it's still beyond passable. That's very good to be working with. I think there's some examples of really high level ball placement and layering. So he's got a better arm, in my opinion, than some like a Cade Klubnik, or Josh Hoover. I think he showcased more anticipation so far than Cade has. And there's just more to his game where that ceiling is really high, and he could be a future top 10 pick. Again, we only have so little tape to work with at this point. It's hard to say that for certain. But you get some negatives for him. I think right now there are moments where he stops his feet a little bit too early in his throwing motion. I like to see him stay a little bit active more because he sometimes ends up over-rotating them to compensate. The pocket management for me is very hit or miss. He's a guy who loves to play hero ball right now. He's a guy who really loves to play hero ball, and he would rather chuck the ball up into a crowd of people than take a sack at this point in time. So he's a guy who really needs to learn to get the ball away or just access the check down. I did see a couple times where it looked like he turned down opportunities to check the ball down and try to go big game hunting instead. It didn't work out for him. That's something that's very easily correctable, I think, especially as you gain more experience and time in the system. But I would like to see him be a little bit more conservative with some of his play style when sensing pressure. He does hold the ball for too long. He does invite pressure. I found he was pressured, and they were not playing very good teams when Arch was on the field last year. But he was pressured quite a bit, I felt like, by these not very good teams behind a very talented Texas offensive line, partially because he's just holding the ball for too long. And then when he does have pressure, he tries to force the ball up a little bit with pressure in his face. He'll throw it into a crowd. So I think he just needs to calm down a bit on some of those moments. He does have the arm arrogance, Bill. So he's got the ability to really build the game, go for those home run shots, which I really appreciate. But there are moments where, like, I think one of you mentioned, he does kind of stare down that first read sometimes. That Louisiana Monroe game, there should have been a pick 6 in that game. He just got lucky. There was a far hash throw on a curl. It should have been a pick 6. He got away with it. But you could tell he was stared down that read the entire time. The DB was triggered on it before he even threw the ball and just got away with one. So there are moments like that. So, and I think this touch a little bit too. The touch on like the short to low intermediate throws, there's moments where he's just a little bit off. So there's stuff I'd like to see him progress with, but he has all the physical tools and traits to be this top 10 pick. I'm just not sure how long it will take for him to get there. And I am a little hesitant to put that on him, even though he is a Manning, based on the fact that we just have like 3 games and change really of him playing quarterback so far. And against not high level competition, really. I mean, it's Mississippi State, UTSA, Louisiana, Monroe. It's just not, you're not facing many NFL players combined between those 3 teams.
So have we gone all the way around on Manning?
We have.
So, Bill, you brought up about, okay, what team is picking at the top, right? So just to add some extra context. So the NFL trade deadline is in November, right?
Right.
The college football season, the playoff, is Monday, January 19th. the next time an NFL trade could be consummated is in March. So meaning that Manning, if he's going to declare, it's either like to your point, Bill, it's either the team already has the number one pick, or the Manning family would have to have a lot of confidence that a team would have the first round capital to get up to number one.
Right.
Right. Because I think we've heard like Manning to the Rams seems to be cliche.
Yep.
Right. I've heard that one a lot. But anyway, so I was just going to kind of offer that there was a portion of the discussion about, well, the Manning family collective, I think is what Bill called it, would have to make the decision to declare. That would likely have to be for a team that's already picking in the top 2 or 3.
Would they want to bring him home to Louisiana? I mean, the Saints are a team that could realistically have the top pick this year.
Yeah, I was going to frame it even as a question. Like, what are they looking for? Like, are they like, the Saints bring him home? Obviously the whole, they haven't taken a first round quarterback since Arch. Like, that's cool. All that. Is it a team like the Giants where they already have an extensive relationship with the Mara family? And, I assume that there's still a trust and relationship there. And New York is obviously the top NFL market that there is. Like, what are, I mean, anybody can answer, Bill, if you want to take it. Like, what do you think the Mannings want for Arch?
I think the biggest thing they're going to want for Arch is not location, but a play caller that has the ability to bring Arch in and develop his skill set. Because, like the New Orleans storyline of being the first round quarterback since his grandfather. But then also you have the conversation, which we're going to have in a little bit, that there's also a quarterback right up the road in Louisiana that's the son of the offensive coordinator. They could be looking at that as well. And then you turn around and you look at Cleveland. Jimmy Haslam, a big Tennessee booster, has a relationship with Peyton Manning. But with anybody with a straight face, and I am a Browns fan, if you couldn't tell, is there anybody with a straight face that says that the Manning family collective will be like, yes, Arch, you can go play in a place where quarterbacks go to die?
So
no,
I think the ownership that could be a thing. I don't think the coaches, and because coaches come and go, right? So right. Eli played under more than one coach. Peyton did. But when the Eli decision was made, so I was a young adult when Eli Manning, and that whole thing went down in that Phillip Rivers draft. Yep. And it was all about A.J. Smith, and Archie Manning did not want his son playing on a team that was managed by A.J. Smith. So to me, it's 90% who is the GM. So for example, do you want Arch to play? Is it Loomis in New
Mickey
Orleans?
Loomis? Yeah, that might be a sticking point in LA. That might be a sticking point in Louisiana.
Right.
That might be a problem.
And that's kind of where I was going, Sam, is that we should be talking about, do the Mannings like the way that Andrew Berry built a team in Cleveland, or do they like the way that Joe Shane is building a team in New York? And I think a lot of us here would say Joe Shane is probably the GM that's got the hottest seat.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would just add, like, how many GMs are in the NFL right now where they have good enough job security that you don't think they could get fired, 1 year into Arch's career or whatever, or even before he gets there. But also, like, what GM am I like? What GM that realistically could get Arch? Because obviously, we could sit here and Howie Roseman's a great GM, and Brett Veach is a great GM, and they have
quarterbacks already.
Brad Holmes, right? But that's my point. Is those are great GMs. I would love to, have a team run by them, and I would love, the Mannings, I'm sure, would love to have Arch with them. That's not realistically going to happen. So how many realistic places that Arch could land, being a top 10 at least potential pick, are also going to come with a great GM that has a reliable job security. Like I don't think it's. I mean, Pittsburgh, is that like what we're?
And then how did that GM named Les Snead get 2 first-round draft picks?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
right. Because I think that in some ways that might be where the Rams comes in, is because that is a GM. I think that it's highly respected.
Yeah,
but I agree. But then that's banking on him declaring this year, which I doubt. I still don't.
Right.
I don't buy
see
that
it.
the Mannings are going to be like, yeah, 1 year as a starter. That's all you need. Like,
yeah.
It just doesn't feel like their style.
Right. Plus the NIL deal that he's got is $6.5 million. That in of itself. But also the other thing too that we also talk about, and Anthony, you hit on it. You know, when you're looking at what the Manning Family Collective, which I'm gonna patent that and trademark that. That's what we're gonna call them now. The Manning Family Collective. When they're going to be looking at whether it's a play caller or specific GM, you hit on it. If they're picking high enough to get Arch, are we even confident that they're going to be making that pick? If a team, Joe Shane, we'll use Shane in New York, if he lands in the top 10, he's probably gone. You know, Andrew Berry, if he lands in the top 10, it'd take a vote of confidence from Haslam, which he's already got, but Haslam is a short temper owner like the other 32 NFL owners. He could be gone. So it could also be a scenario where then at that point, GM is out the window and play caller is out the window. So now we start looking at the off the field. What's the big markets? LA, New York, Texas, the Florida, those big markets, and say, you know, hey, whoever the GM is, the play caller is, we'll accept that because we know that he's going to go to a situation where he has a new GM and a new coach, but he's in a large market to help build his future. So that's the conversation we have to have. I ultimately also think he's a 2027 guy. I think it's a moot point talking about him this year, but it's a fun conversation to have because even if he comes out next year, you're looking, provided he stays on the upswing that he's on, you're looking at the number 1 overall pick. So now the conversation is, do you go into a tank for Arch situation? You know, we don't believe tanking in the NFL is an actual thing, but there are such things as trying hard to win and trying moderately difficult to win in the NFL. You know, when you roll out, you know, 4 quarterback competitions, that's a thing. But that's the conversation you have to have. But I think that's the big thing with Arch is what does his support system around him look for, and where are they willing to compromise? Because we've seen it. We've seen Peyton. We've seen Eli. There are things that family looks for that are non-starters.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
That I don't know if it's going to infuriate people or if it's just going to like make people eye roll. Do we think that the Manning Family Collective, as I will now call them as well, do we think the Manning Family Collective would, I guess tolerate is the word, Jerry Jones? Because if you're asking me, who's a team that's going to have a GM that's not going to go anywhere, Jerry ain't going anywhere until he dies. Not that I'm wishing that. That's a fact. They may need a quarterback depending on what happens with Dak in the next couple seasons. TBD on all of that, but you know, it doesn't feel like he's like 100% their guy long term at least. You know, it's a big market. America's team, as Cowboys fans love to shout. I'm just Texas. I mean, you obviously have the Texas connection. I genuinely don't know how the Mannings would feel about Jerry Jones. I mean, they've all been involved in the NFL for, you know, at least my entire life, and before that. So it's a hypothetical. I don't really know the answer, but that's kind of the one team that's like kind of checks the quote unquote boxes that are there. I don't think any of us.
I think they tend to like hands-off owners more. Really, I think they like the teams that the GMs do their jobs and kind of let the GMs and coaches run the show based on where they played and who they played for. So I don't know that'd be a really good fit for Arch, especially when you look at some of the contract extension issues the team has had. past couple of years, I don't think they'd be jumping at the cliff for that. But this is a conversation we can have for, depending on when he declares, the next 18 to 30 months. Like, we could be doing this for forever. So we're going to have plenty of time to rehash this conversation over and over again.
That's the art of content creation. They're giving us content, right? Yeah. It's what we do with it.
It is.
That being said, everybody, we are just getting warmed up. We have covered 3 quarterbacks. We have 2 left. So we have Garrett Nussmeier left and LaNorris Sellers left. Sam, you want to kick off Garrett Nussmeier?
Yeah, so Garrett Nussmeier is a quarterback who I'm a little bit lower on. To frame it this way, when I was asked, would you think he's a first-round pick or he doesn't go in the top 100? Which side would you lean towards? To me, personally, I'm more towards the wouldn't go in the top 100 level. I think he will go there. I have a 3rd-round grade on him currently, but there's a lot you have to kind of work through with this guy. The list of negatives is pretty significant. He's not really a mobile quarterback, doesn't have prototypical size, only has 1 year of starting experience, but he's kind of up against it here in terms of eligibility. And we've noticed it's become a trend where you have more experience in college or more successful early on in your NFL career at this point. And the way his arm limitations are a pretty significant issue, in my opinion. There's a lot of underthrown posts and fade routes on his tape. And that's a significant problem for me. He just doesn't have the arm. He doesn't have the velocity. He doesn't have the arm strength to really compete with some of these other guys that we're seeing in this quarterback class. To me, he's looking at more like a C+ level arm in comparison to all the guys we've talked about so far. I think even Josh Hoover has better timing. So Josh Hoover has fewer underthrows downfield than even Garrett Nussmeier does. I think he has a lot of issues throwing needlessly off platform, and that kind of leaves his accuracy falling off a cliff. He's not a guy who creates really well outside of structure, creates well off platform. So I think he does overestimate his arm. He's got a gunslinger mentality. We talked about this a couple times on the show. There's been a couple mentions of this. Nussmeier is like a true test the window kind of guy. And he just doesn't have the arm strength and velocity to consistently hit those, which really kind of concern me because you pair those two up and it's just a really tough profile to work off of. And there have been games where he's thrown LSU out of, frankly. Like I think it was Texas A&M this past year. Yeah. There are games where there's collapses. And you don't really get that from all the quarterbacks we've talked about so far. These other guys kind of rebound a little bit. We've seen Cade have some late game heroics or Clemson here down the stretch in this past season. You don't really get a lot of that from Garrett Nussmeier. He does have some nice clutch performances, I think, but he also has those kind of breakdown games as well. So for me, I'm linking him more as like a long-term backup. I don't think this guy is going to be this early round draft pick. When we talked about you lose some stuff with your team, we talked about this with TCU and Hoover. What unit in college football is poised to take a more significant step back than LSU's offensive line? I know they have a bunch of 4 and 5 stars out there. They have no playing experience, frankly, because they just put 4 guys in the NFL, I think, in the draft this past year. You're doing like a total reset of that offensive line. The receiving core is fairly new. There are a lot of talented players, but a lot of them are newer guys. So I think overall, you're looking at this team, there's a chance that LSU as a whole doesn't really meet expectations this year. And it's not really set up for Nussmeier to have the most success possible. I do think he layers the ball well. He's got some good velocity over the middle of the field. His ability to really put the ball between that second and third level of defense, just drop it in, is fantastic. He can really manipulate the football, fit it into really minuscule windows over the middle of the field. And despite not having the best height, he actually does throw really well over the middle of the field. But I look at the far hash kind of throws. That's become a little bit more difficult for me to deal with. I think there's some positives here, really. He's got a nice, clean throwing motion as well, various arm angles. He's really tough in the pocket. I think there's showcased some anticipation as well to put the ball in tight windows. Good touch as well at the intermediate deep levels. But putting it all together, it's a player who I would try to not pick in the first 2 rounds if I could in this upcoming draft.
Okay, I like it. So, Durst, what do you have on the LSU product?
Yeah, so him and Klubnik both scored really well in my scoring system, but the way my system is, it doesn't really allow for a lot of subjectivity and projections and so forth. So I do kind of think that I had both of them as sort of like a day 2 guys, but they scored really well in my scoring system. I would say that Nussmeier has a pretty lengthy list of negatives given how well he scored in my scoring system. So he's going to be a 24-year-old rookie with 14 starts. so he's old, but doesn't have a whole lot of experience. And according to what I was able to determine, it sounds like he's got like 9-inch hands. So he's kind of small, old, and inexperienced. So now to kind of go into some of the positives, son of NFL coach and former offensive coordinator Doug Nussmeier, Garrett has got very good footwork and smooth mechanics, very good touch timing anticipation. He will look off defenders and get to second and third progressions. Great ball placement to layer throws into smaller middle of the field windows. Efficient in the quick game and can be surgical when the pocket holds up. Knows when to throw the ball away, which earlier we were talking about somebody, but I forget who we were talking about, but knows when to throw the ball away and live to fight another day was something that somebody else didn't have. I think Bill, I think you said that about Klubnik, but I think this is something that Nussmeier does have. He will step up into the pocket, and he's just got a 9.8% sack to pressure or pressure to sack ratio in 2024. He consistently throws receivers open, and he didn't have really good receivers in 2024. I think he's going to be much better in 2025. That does remain to be seen. But again, to the list of negatives, I feel like he needs play action and design rollouts to keep the defensive from teeing off. He's got average to below average size, frame, arm strength, and athleticism. Deeper outs are often one-hopped or ankle catches. Occasionally fooled by rotating coverages. His TD to interception ratio drops from 24 to 8 to 5 to 4 when pressured. He does not have many solutions to pressure. He will throw the ball too early, even before the receiver is looking or ready when he feels bodies are around him. Again, I mean, that may sound like anticipation, but sometimes it's just like, chuck it up. Other times he will just tuck the ball and fall down. I don't think you'll see anybody else in this class who will sit there and just let me just tuck the ball and fall down on the ground before they get me. So I have a comp of Teddy Bridgewater, a very small, athletically limited player, even before the injuries took its toll. So I have him as a day 2 prospect.
Okay.
I forget who's up next now. Anthony,
the floor is yours for Garrett Nussmeier.
Sure. Yeah. So Nussmeier, I mean, I think you guys hit a lot of the big points. I don't think I'm as, I'll say, concerned about the lack of arm talent. And I don't even disagree that I don't think he has a fantastic arm by any means, but I saw him make NFL throws at all 3 levels of the field. And I also saw the throws with anticipation. I thought, to like what Durst said, I think he threw guys open. And I think he's one of the few guys that we're talking about both tonight and just in general with this quarterback class, where he did not have great receivers this past year. And I actually think he's going to be getting an upgrade in terms of his weapons. Now, that said, Sam absolutely is correct. The offensive line is fully resetting, and that is a huge red flag for what we're going to see from Nussmeier this year. You're talking about, what was it? It was Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Garrett Dellinger, and the other guard whose name escapes me at the moment.
Miles Frazier. But all those guys are now in the NFL, and from what I've seen, LSU doesn't have anyone that's going to be, as I'll say, as highly touted as anyone. I mean, remotely close to Will Campbell, and even I think Emory Jones even went. Did he go early day 3 or like late day 2? Yeah.
So I don't even know if they're going to have that kind of player on their offensive line this year. So it's a huge red flag. I guess there's just kind of hope that Cade Durham, their running back, can also step up and help alleviate some of the, some stuff for Garrett Nussmeier. But I think he's a limited athlete. I think he loses just all of his sense when he's pressured. He night and day transformation from the guy who can sit in the pocket. And again, I think he can make those NFL throws all around the field. But when the pocket collapses and when he's forced to make a decision fast, it does not go well. And again, part of that too is he doesn't have the athleticism to really get outside the pocket and make plays. He is a true pocket passer, which in this day and age in the NFL it's not ideal. I mean, it's a pretty red flag, honestly. Like in this day and age, you need to have at least functional athleticism, and it doesn't feel like he has that. You also, I think Durst touched on the frame. That is also a concern. That he's only 200 pounds. I didn't realize we had so many like frame question guys tonight, but that just kind of worked out. So listen, I want to buy in because he's the son of a coach, and I think he's very smart. I do think he processes fairly well, particularly when the pocket's clean. But there are these. It's sort of similar to how I felt about Shedeur. I think he had good ability in a clean pocket, but I think there were questions about just how functional his athleticism was, and also, what he could do when the pocket collapsed. In Shedeur's case, it was more taking sacks, whereas with Nussmeier, it's, it could lead to turning the ball over and at least not being able to make a play downfield. So, we'll see what happens. And again, we'll see what happens with this very new look LSU offense. Right now, I think he is like a day 2 guy and probably closer to like the back end of day 2. There's stuff to like, but I'm not sure I'm sold on the first round hype. I feel like every mock draft I see with the Saints first round pick, it's Garrett Nussmeier because his dad's the offensive coordinator. And it's like, maybe we should slow our roll a little bit on that. But Bill, if you want to go ahead and wrap up Nussmeier here.
Yeah, so with Nussmeier, you're talking 6'1.5", 204 pounds. Durst talked about it, 9-inch hands. So it's a frame conversation. Can he withstand an entire NFL season? The arm talent is natural in the aspect that he can generate velocity with ease. It's not a strong arm. It's a easy velocity generation. This is a guy, I call it the LTA from the McShay report, load to arrival. He loads up and that ball hops off his hand. He does show some really good touch layering passes between the defenders. You watch the Ole Miss game. He layered the ball in there very well. A good processor when the first read's available. He does really well in the RPO game as well. Shows flashes of anticipation throwing, especially releasing before that wide receiver breaks. But the conversation that you have to have with Garrett Nussmeier is the frame, obviously, but then also he's just inconsistent in terms of his progressions and staring down his receivers. You watched the Texas A&M game, Sam. I know you talked about it. It's a tale of two halves. In that first half, that first read was open and he was quick and decisive and there, and he looked like a star. And then in the second half, they took away that first read. They started throwing in more complex looks and disguising coverages. And you saw him get visibly shaken and confused. He did not know which way was up. And that's the kind of thing that you have to be wary with Garrett Nussmeier. And he also is a big play hunter. This is a guy, you watch the Alabama game, he passed up easy completions in the flats and the check down Charlies, hunting the big play. He's a gamer. He's a gamer by every sense of the word. And for me, Garrett Nussmeier, I have him outside of my first round grades. He's my 20th overall prospect. I have 18 first round grades in total. He's my 20th overall prospect, my QB4. I see a lot of Baker Mayfield, whereas Baker had a bit of a better arm. I think Nussmeier's a better a bit of a better athlete in terms of movement throughout the pocket, but a lot of the same things are there. The gunslinger, big play hunter mentality, the natural arm talent, the inconsistency in progressions, and when you look at these wide receivers, and Anthony, I'm glad you hit on him, he's going to have some legitimate wide receiver talent. You look Aaron Anderson from LSU, Nick Anderson from LSU, Barian Brown, Chris Hilton. 3 of those 4 names are in essentially my top 5 rounds. Chris Hilton is the one outlier. I've got him on the outside looking in just because we haven't really seen that much from him. But and Sam and Anthony, you both hit on it as well. This offensive line is going to be completely rebuilt from the ground up. I have one LSU offensive lineman in my top 105, and that's Braylon Moore, the center. So we're going to see very quickly how well Garrett Nussmeier works in pressure situations, because he's going to be under some significant pressure because that offensive line might be under siege early on. And we're going to find out very early in week 1, LSU versus Clemson, because you got TJ Parker and Peter Woods coming to town and your offensive line is 4 new starters. Essentially, he could be under siege very quickly.
Well, I want to add a couple things to the LSU offensive line. So there's an offensive line transfer. I believe he came from Northwestern. His name is Josh Thompson. So they were active in the portal. If you haven't watched Josh Thompson yet, he was covered on the LSU podcast, and he is getting rave reviews. Specifically, if you are still here, because you were here at the beginning, right? So I think Owen was on that LSU podcast, and I think everybody that watched Josh Thompson really liked him. Like, they really liked him a lot. So that would have been Dale, Owen, and David. Chris Hilton, who Bill mentioned, there's 3 LSU wide receivers that everybody's talking about, and then there's Chris Hilton. But Chris Hilton is that wide receiver that blocks, so he might actually be a better NFL receiver than the Aaron Andersons and Barian Browns of the world. So I wanted to give a plug that if anybody wants to hear a 1-hour breakdown of LSU, there is an LSU podcast that was done about a month ago. Go back on the channel and listen to it, because it's a lot of the same things that were being discussed here about Nussmeier were also framed up on that LSU podcast. And we also had an LSU podcaster join us, which added a little bit of spice to that podcast as well. So are all of you day 2 on Nussmeier?
Yeah, I am.
Yep.
Okay. And we've gone all the way around on Nussmeier?
Yep, we've gone all the way around on Nussmeier.
Okay. So why don't we pause for a quick commercial? Sam, do you want to let everybody know who you are and about your Substack and all of your other content?
Yeah, so I'm Sam Teets. I run the Substack Sports Talk with Sam Teets, where at this point we're posting 5 days a week. We got tons of scouting profiles coming out. We have a Thursday mailbag. In season, we're going to have Monday, right after the weekend, we're going to have Stock Up series, kind of breaking down some of the best performances from the week. And we're going to have, of course, some content based around Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl later this year as well. So if you want to go and check all that out for free, so go over to Substack. It's totally free. You can go search Sports Talk with Sam Teets. I'm going to be or just plug in Sam Teets. I'm going to be the only name that pops up. You can also just Google that. It will pop up as well. And you subscribe to your email and get all this to your inbox every day for totally free. All these scouting reports, these big boards, everything like that. And if you want to go follow me on social, it's Sam_Teets33, where I post daily clips as well as links to my scouting reports. So feel free to go check it out. We're over 1,500 followers right now. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, so I'd love to have you all along for the ride.
Anthony.
Yep. First off, too, follow Sam Teets' Substack. It's great stuff. But you can find me on X at Anthony_Russo97. I've put out my top 100 board. That's also getting rave reviews, and nobody has any problems with it. But I'm going to put out I'm planning on doing like one more mock before the season starts, one more mock draft. And I'm gonna get back into the tape watching. I took a couple days off after finishing my board, but I'm gonna get back into it before the season gets started here. And I always love interacting with fellow draft professors and non-draft professors about just the NFL draft in general. So yeah, follow me there for all that good stuff.
Durst.
No, you can't, Ryan. No, you cannot.
All right, so you can follow me on Twitter/X at Durst NFL Draft. I just today did my, I guess it's maybe like 30 player quarterback rankings. So as I mentioned before, I've been doing some numerical rankings, and so I've got a thread there that kind of explains my process and what categories, what traits and skills I'm looking for these quarterbacks. We've been studying them all summer, so I finally put it all out on like a ranking sheet. So anyway, I hope you guys check it out. Give me some feedback. Bill, tell us about yourself.
Yes, you can find all of my content over on X at Spark Scouting. You can also find me on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Substack as well. If you search Spark Scouting, you'll see my lovely mug. Speaking of Substack, I cannot vouch enough for Sam Teets' Substack as well. It is a lovely read. Make sure you subscribe to it. Also a writer and analyst for the Right Way Sports Network. It's twsn.net. You can go check out all of my NFL and NFL draft content. I also dropped my top 105 over there, and it is also getting rave reviews, and no one is disagreeing with it at all. And in addition to that, Ryan, I know you said you can never have too many mock drafts. Well, our lovely moderator has one of the best NFL mock draft simulators on the internet. No, I was not paid to say that. I say it of my own free will and volition. But you can make sure to follow him here at the channel, NFL Draft Fanatic, no IN Fanatic. Turn on that notification bell so you get notified when we go live with daily draft content. Head over to thedraftprofessor.com and check out that mock draft simulator. And we've got our lovely schedule down at the bottom of the screen here for you. It is jam-packed, but don't take my word for it. Jim, tell the lovely people.
Yeah, so Bill did most of that really well. So there's a lot of you watching. This is our last quarterback show of the summer on Fridays, but you will be able to see Bill and Owen and Durst discussing 2026 likely quarterbacks on Wednesday this week. So we're starting to shift into what we would call our normal draft professor schedule, which means Durst and Bill will be on Wednesdays, but you will see Bill on Friday next week as well. So, he might be cloning himself or something to that effect. But I do want to highlight a couple of podcasts. So tomorrow morning, we're doing Draft a Team. Sam, I think you said you'd be there. Randall will be there. Anthony will be there. And what you're going to see are approximately 7 or 8 people snake drafting a team from 2026 draft eligible players. And if 8 players or if 8 people have to draft 22 players, we're going to drop about 176 names at you. So if your board isn't 176 names deep, that's a good podcast to find out, okay, that's somebody I should watch. Right? You're going to be able to get kind of what your let's say I don't even want to say that's the top half of your board, but you're going to be able to get the meat of your board of who we collectively as a group. So that would be the Draft Professor Collective as opposed to the Manning Family Collective. But anyways, and then we also have Dalton Miller and Ian Cummings coming on Sunday. So it was supposed to be a top 20 cornerback board, but Dalton Miller just moved from Portugal to the United States. So we're knocking it down to a top 10 with Ian, EJ, Dalton, and Brian. And you can see the rest of the schedule there. And I could talk for hours about the content that's coming up. But instead of listening to me talk, hit subscribe, show up every podcast, and then I don't talk so much. Bill.
Yes.
Man of the hour. It's LaNorris Sellers.
Yeah, it's LaNorris Sellers. So the big thing you watch at LaNorris Sellers, 6'3", 242, exceptional arm talent, easy velocity. This is a guy that could push the ball 60 yards down the field with minimal strain and just has a zip on it, firing it in there. A natural runner who has some serious juice. Also he loves to create explosive plays out of structure, but is really trying to work within structure. And that's what you love to see when you see quarterbacks that thrive out of structure. You want to see them kind of rein it back in a little bit. High football IQ with a very good processing speed. He has the ability to read defenses pre-snap and post-snap. I would love to see a little more consistency in this aspect, but we also have to talk about this is a guy very young, not going to turn 21 years old until after his junior season kicks off. So you have a long runway with LaNorris Sellers. He sometimes plays too fast. Like his hair is on fire, especially against pressure. He's got to slow that mental clock down and reel it back in. Does trust his arm talent a little too much, leading to balls that are forced into windows that they shouldn't be. But I really want to see him focus on this season, throwing with anticipation. This is a thing with Sellers. A lot of times it's almost like the wide receiver has to stare at him and give him a thumbs up and say, I'm ready for the ball. Throw that thing in there and let that thing rip, which you really don't hear people say about quarterbacks. Hey, just go out there and let it rip. But LaNorris Sellers, please go out there and let it rip. But you combine all of that, the arm talent, the anticipation, the athletic ability, the physical size. For me, he reminds me an awful lot of Dante Culpepper. And he is my number 2 overall prospect, my quarterback 1. And if he comes out this year, I would take him first overall. If he comes out next year, I'd take him first overall, even over Arch Manning, who we talked about earlier, because the tools and the traits just jump off the page, and the natural athletic ability he brings and the strong arm that he brings, it's just otherworldly, and it's stuff you can't really teach. And that's why I would take him at the top, but there are some things that he does need to clean up. So Durst, what do you have on the South Carolina product?
Well, I'm glad you came to me next. I don't know if you knew this, but I actually have Dante Culpepper as my at least upside comp as well. We did a South Carolina episode about 2 months ago, going over all the different teams. So another plug for the draft professor there. But I do have a downside comp as Jake Locker. So another guy that was a really good athlete that maybe never quite figured out the nuances of playing the position. So. Out of all the redshirt sophomore quarterbacks, he's the guy I think's most likely. I don't think Dante Moore's coming out. I really don't think Manning's coming out. And even Sam Levitt, I know is a hot name. And I kind of think all 3 of them will probably go back to school. But I've heard some things. There's a really good chance that if he has the season expected, that Sellers is going to come out. So strengths, prototypical size and frame, excellent arm strength, range, and velocity. His legs will be a weapon in the NFL. He can run quarterback power, and Sellers can break sack and tackle attempts of legitimate NFL prospects. It's not just missed forced tackles. It's not just breaking tackles. He can break the tackles of actual NFL guys that he's played against already and is going to be playing against. Good accuracy in the short to deep levels of the field. It's the intermediate I'm a little bit skeptical on. And then after losing 3 straight games, he did help South Carolina win 6 straight games to close out at least the regular season. So just a redshirt sophomore, Sellers will telegraph throws and needs to work on reading defenses, looking off defenders and going through his progressions, and improving his overall accuracy. Generally, he has to see it open before he will throw it. Can occasionally be a one read and then take off runner. Needs to improve at avoiding the negative plays. So he didn't. He is my second ranked quarterback, preview for the Wednesday show, but he didn't show up second, or he didn't score second in my scoring system. And part of it was the disconnect between sack avoidance. So he can shake off sacks and tackles from legitimate NFL prospects. Problem is, he actually took 31 sacks. So he has in my scoring system, it didn't really allow for me to subjectively override that in a sense. So he needs to improve at avoiding negative plays, including 31 sacks, 7 interceptions, and 11 fumbles in 2024. He also had a right ankle injury in 2024, although I don't really think that's anything to worry about. And really, redshirt sophomores have a pretty poor track record in NFL if you go back and look at draft history. But in the end, Sellers is what most NFL teams are looking for in the modern quarterback. He combines efficient in-structure precision with off-script escapability and physicality as a runner. He appears to be a great leader, as he was voted a team captain as just a redshirt freshman. So I'm very excited about him. Again, I think that he would be probably my favorite in terms of who would be, like, if I had to bet on one person to be the number one pick in the draft in 2026, this would actually be the guy, knowing some of the other guys probably won't be coming out.
Love it.
So Anthony.
Yeah, sure. So I normally don't do comps. That's just not my area of expertise. I leave it to the comp king over here. But I will say that LaNorris Sellers, when asked who his favorite player is in NFL history, he said Cam Newton, and that feels like my comp for him. I think LaNorris Sellers has the most exceptional blend of size, speed, and athleticism that I have ever seen, scouting people, which is not that long of a time, admittedly, but I've never seen a quarterback that looks like LaNorris Sellers, that has the athletic profile of LaNorris Sellers. His sack avoidance is undoubtedly comp king, man. He's the comp king. There's no doubt. But I've never seen a quarterback avoid sacks the way that he does, and I think it's a combination of, to what Durst talked about, like physically overwhelming people, rushers who will be NFL prospects, and then also just speed and quick feet and being able to just outrun people who will be NFL prospects. And I shared a play. This was a while ago. I pulled it up because I shared a clip on May 17th of LaNorris Sellers when I first did his eval. And it sort of epitomizes, it's from the Cheez-It Bowl. Great name for a bowl game. But when they played Illinois, and there's a play where LaNorris Sellers is like, the pressure's coming in, pockets collapsing, nobody's open, and you see him just dancing around, trying to make a play. And one of the best things he does is, for a guy who is so athletically gifted and is very effective as a scrambler, he keeps his eyes downfield. He is a passer first, and I think that is not something to be overlooked. He wants to be a quarterback. He doesn't want to be a running back that just throws. But he's dancing around the pocket, and then eventually escapes pressure, scrambles to his right, but then just misses a throw. It feels like it's just a mechanics thing, and that whole clip just epitomizes LaNorris Sellers, where he's going to do incredible things. He has the incredible escapability, and he has the arm talent. Certainly has a strong enough arm to stretch the field vertically and also just hit NFL throws. But there are these times where he just misses. He just misses throws that he should not miss, even as a redshirt sophomore. And I think there is some inconsistency with his mechanics and his footwork as a passer that I think he needs to clean up. The 31 sacks that Durst talked about is a problem. He just takes too many sacks. He holds the ball too long. Needs to work on that. Ball security is not ideal. For a guy who I think he had 850 rushing yards, which is a great amount, but also had 11 fumbles. And so that's not ideal. It's not horrific given how much he's running the ball, but you want to see him cut that down. I also just think in general, just, things like his pre-snap recognition, I think needs some work. His ball placement is work. It felt like there were times where he wasn't throwing people open. He was making it harder for receivers. That said, too, didn't really have fantastic weapons, and I would say still doesn't really. I mean, Nick Harbor just feels like the ultimate wild card of what he could be. But so, that's something too that he'll have to deal with. But I think what it comes down to, he has, in my mind, the highest ceiling of any quarterback that we've talked about in these past however many weeks we've been doing this. And I would argue, I would include Arch. Like, I think pound for pound, if you take ceiling versus ceiling, I do think LaNorris Sellers is higher because of just how athletically gifted he is. But there is also a lot that needs to be cleaned up and refined and tailored to being an NFL long-term starting quarterback. So it's all there. He just needs to kind of put it together. And I don't know if one more unlike Arch, he already has a full year as a starter and will have a second year as a full-time starter, when this season ends. So maybe he feels like he's ready by the time the year ends. And it would also probably depend how far South Carolina goes, whether they make the playoff this year and they're able to go far, who knows? But it feels like right now, if I had to give him advice, I would probably tell him to mentally prepare for staying one more year. And while selfishly, I would love to see him in the NFL as soon as possible, the idea of having Arch, LaNorris Sellers, and DJ Lagway in the same quarterback class is kind of awesome. So there's that part of it too. But Sam, if you want to bring us home on LaNorris Sellers here.
Yeah, I think you guys hit most of the high points of what he does well. I'll say the one thing that separates him, to me, in comparison to other, we'll say, athletic big arm quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson as prospects, I think that Sellers actually does a better touch than those guys. I think he throws a better touch at the intermediate to deep levels of the field than you got from those players. I think he does a better job trying to win within the actual pocket than some of those guys did. So I think the upside for him is significantly better. He's at the level where he's already significantly better than what I thought Anthony Richardson was when Richardson declared he came out. And I think his college tape is actually going to be better than Josh Allen's college tape was by the end of it. Josh Allen, of course, had the incredible development arc, and you guys know, his development arc is something that was never happened in my lifetime and might never happen the rest of my lifetime. So we can't count on that necessarily for anyone else. But Sellers, you guys hit all the high points. I think he's also good at avoiding the overthrows that happen to a lot of these strong arm quarterbacks. He doesn't have as many clean, just blatant overthrows where he put too much velocity in the ball and it sails. He doesn't have as many of those moments either. So I think he's got much more control of his arm than some of the guys I previously mentioned. Some negatives for him, I think the pocket presence is really not very good at this point in time. He's a player who has very steep dropbacks, puts a lot of pressure on his already not very good offensive tackles, and then he just keeps dropping back. He does not step up very well. He doesn't manage the pocket at a high level. He gets stuck on his read till he will have trouble kind of progressing at times. It's the mental process is just not as quick and as sharp as it needs to be. He rarely gets to the backside of plays, and he will stare down some of his initial read sometimes and have trouble getting off of that. I think the throwing motion is good, but I feel like he's throwing with all arm at times. He's not really incorporating his core and lower body into the throwing motion. So I'd like to see him potentially even add more velocity and more arm strength to his throws by doing that. You guys hit on this thing. Bill, you hit on this, like no anticipation whatsoever on his tape. And that's like the thing that really stands with me in comparison to the other guys we talked about. Like everyone else we talked about today at least has some reps of anticipation. With LaNorris, I don't see any of it. So I think that's a big issue for him right now. It comes back to a bit the mental area of the game. But yeah, there's also opportunity. Like I see him stare down checkdowns at times, and you see like he makes eye contact, and then he goes back downfield, and he's trying to throw the ball further downfield. I think he has to take some of the easy buttons because he holds the ball for too long, too often, and I think he just bypasses those shorter plays. And it's not something like we've seen this with a lot of quarterbacks previously. Some quarterbacks were very good. Mahomes had this problem when he came out of college. He just would not take the check down a lot of times early in his career. And even at Texas Tech. You can work into that and develop that eventually. But to me, Sellers, with the offensive line you're dealing with right now, I get you have an amazing arm. I get you can run scramble. But you're not going to be able to avoid every sack. So I think he needs to take more of those check down opportunities than he has so far. And he needs to kind of avoid holding the ball for too long. So there's a lot of mental aspects to the game. Right now, I think he's got to be I think he's going to be a 2027 guy. For him to make the jump from where he was this past year to be a top 10 pick would be a pretty significant reach, in my opinion. That would be like historic level development at the college level in a 1-year cycle. And I'm at the point where like these tools and quarterbacks, if you don't have the mental aspect of the game, I'm just not taking you top 10. The NFL doesn't have time to develop you. Guys' jobs are on the line. It's just not going to happen. So I think, like I said, Sellers to me is going to be a better player than Anthony Richardson was. I think Sellers is already a better player than Anthony Richardson was when he came out. I think he's going to have better college tape than what Josh Allen had in his final seasons. But, just based off last year alone, like last year's tape, if I graded out flat, no bump for being quarterback or anything, last year's tape is probably more like a late second round kind of grade. He has a lot of work to do to get back up to being like a true top 10 guy and playing at the level of a top 10 player in college before getting to the NFL. So I think that you're really looking at him as a 2027 player. You guys highlighted there's a ton of strengths to his game. But right now, I think there's just enough weaknesses, especially in the mental aspect of the game, that I'm not going to go out there and say for sure that he'll have a year where he's going to be a top 10 guy. It's definitely a possibility. He has all the potential in the world to be the best quarterback in this draft class or the best quarterback in the 2027 class. But I'm not there with him right now based on last year's tape.
Any additional comments on Sellers?
I think the one thing that I'm excited to see from Sellers, and not so much excited, but I would love to see, I just want him to, and I just said this, earlier on, I want him to go out there and just let it rip. Like you have the arm talent and you have somewhat of an anticipation. If you see a small window and just trust your arm and let it rip, you're going to make mistakes. I think that's the big thing that someone in the coaching staff's got to stress to him. It is okay to make a mistake now and again. It's not okay to go out there and just continuously let it rip like gunslingers like Klubnik and Nussmeier. But, if you see a faint window and you trust your arm, and shout out to Corey Kinnan over at Daft on Draft, he calls it arm arrogance. And that's what I want to see. Like, just let the thing rip. Because he has the arm, he can make some of those tight window throws. So that's what I'd be curious to see this season if he just cocks back and just lets it rip in some of those smaller windows.
Okay, I want to give a shout out to a lot of people that are here. Taylor, you can catch Taylor podcasting on Thursdays with Draft Professor. So Taylor, good to see you here. Ryan Sparks, he hopped on a Draft Professor podcast a couple Thursdays ago, and Ryan just started his own draft podcast, so definitely check Ryan out, please. Andy, Draft Professor, you can catch Andy on Tuesdays. I think Andy's first Tuesday podcast will be a week from this Tuesday. See, Andy, Taylor. I'm looking to, Steve. So I think Steve will be podcasting on Thursday some. That discussion is still ongoing. So I want to make it clear, Steve hasn't promised anything, but we're still talking about it. Hank is here. Hank, I believe you will catch him podcasting with Draft Professor on Mondays. I think I know that Sam Teets guy. Catch Sam at his Substack, and then I ask Sam to podcast a lot. Sometimes he says yes. So thanks for being here, Sam. Let's see, who else? Home Squad. You can catch Home Squad Sports with Hank on Mondays, a draft professor, and Benjamin Hodge. So Ben and I have talked about podcasting, but he hasn't committed to anything yet. And then Owen. Owen, are you still here? So Owen's here like in the chat every Friday night. He's probably has a drink in his hand, and he's listening to us as he's doing whatever Owen does on Friday. So I just want to give a shout out to everybody that's here because this was a really active chat. And we have a lot of people listening to a draft podcast. And it's August 1st, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
The draft is 8 months away. And this has by far been our best podcast on Fridays in the summer. So to the chat, everybody, thank you very much. Like I said, we're going to be covering quarterbacks a lot. Let's say in the next 8 to 10 weeks. So if there's a question you have on a quarterback, just send a message in and we'll see if we can put a podcast together for you to try to answer your question. So, but that being said, we are almost 2 hours deep. For Durst, Anthony, Bill, special guest Sam Teets, for myself and the 85 podcasters at the Draft Professor, it's been an incredible Friday night, everybody. Enjoy your Friday, and we'll see you on a podcast again bright and early tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.